Okay, so today we transition from the heather tree, shrub, to the aspen tree. And aspen is the most very fascinating tree, and it's the job it plays is fascinating. And it's not just in Irish or Celtic mythology, it seems to be quite global that aspen is the psychopomp tree. Now, if you don't know what the word psychopomp means, I'll just explain it quickly. It's Greek, and psychopomp literally translates as the guide of souls, or soul guide, spirit guide sort of thing. Now, every culture has psychopomps. It can be a god or a goddess or an animal. It's this entity that is going to lead your soul to the next world when you die. It can be Cygnus the swan, it can be the spirit horse, it can be the Celtic wild hunt, it could be Jesus, whatever spirit guide is going to lead your soul to the next place is the psychopomp. So it's just a Greek word for that. Now, aspen, and I didn't know this until very recently, aspen plays this psychopomp role, and it can be proved archaeologically, and I'll show some evidence later, going back nearly 5,000 years, that aspen has been the tree of the psychopomp, if you like. Before we get into that, then, I'm going to talk about something a little bit dark, but it's only just to try and get your head around things a little bit. So one element of the Ogham Grove journey that we've been looking at this year, certainly from summer solstice onwards, when after apple, we went into the days of vine and ivy and broom, and all of that was singing a song of the ancient mystery traditions. Okay, and that third acma of the Ogham leads you to autumn equinox, and it's kind of preparatory wine drinking ceremonies before the mystery rites begin. And then the mystery rites begin after the autumn equinox. So that begins with the pine tree and the gorse and the heather, and now into the aspen. So keeping things really simple, the mystery schools then, and no one really knows what happened in the mystery schools, other than there were lots of different types of mystery schools, but they were sworn to secrecy. So there's lots of guessing and nothing known for certain, but you can look at old iconography and statues and what various Romans and Greeks will say about them, but they're all sworn to secrecy. But the basic elements are that they're spiritual experiences involving theatre, maybe intoxicating drugs or wine that maybe gives people visions as well. But whatever happens in each mystery school, the person getting involved had experiences that gave them afterwards a complete belief in the continuation of the soul. They were no longer frightened of dying. They understood that their body was just flesh and bone, but there was a spirit living in that body. Now, here's I'm going to be a bit gruesome now, but it's just to try and illustrate a point. You could chop both your arms off and chop your legs off, and you would still be you. You are not your bones, you are not your muscles, you are not your limbs. Now, in some shamanic practices, there's a thing called dismemberment. It's pretty gruesome, but it's the same sort of thing. Now this is pretty horrible, but you could chop your nose off, take your eyes out, and cut your ears off, but you would still be you. You are not your face. Now, when we think about ourselves or our loved ones or our friends, we think of their faces. You know, that's what we picture in our minds, is the face of our loved ones, but we are not our faces. You know, we are souls inside a body, you know, and the body has a life expectancy. It will die eventually. So that's the reality slap. That's the bitter pill then, you know. So the mystery schools are about the part of you that's eternal, and it's your soul, you know, and it's frightening. It's frightening because the unknown is frightening. Of course it's frightening. Just letting someone in. So psyche, the word psychopomp, or guide of souls, is a spirit guide that guides your soul to the next world. You know, now that the next world can be seen as heaven or the spirit realm or the realm of ancestors. Now, before we go into that any further, I want to, although there's a dark element to it, it's really an optimistic element, you know, that the soul continues. And that's what the Druids taught anyway. According to Julius Caesar in 50 BC, they had some sort of concept of reincarnation or the transmigration of the soul, you know, but you are not flesh and bone. You are not meat. You know, you're something more than meat and bones. Now, before we get into that, and talk about the Irish law itself. So there was a thing in Ireland, an aspen rod, and it's called a fée. It's just spelled F-E, fée. And it was a thing of taboo. People really didn't like to go anywhere near a fée because of what its job was, you know. And its job had one specific purpose, and its specific purpose was for measuring out a body for burial, you know. So every church had one, you know, but no one in the village wanted to go near this piece of wood because its only purpose was for measuring out bodies for burial. That seems quite dark, but the evidence I'm going to give you further on are quite wonderful, really, because aspen is the psychopomp tree, you know. So straight away, somewhere back in Ireland, they're using the psychopomp tree for helping the soul leave the body and move on to the next place, really, is what's going on. Now, the Bryatheroum, the word kennings for aspen, the first one translates in English as distinguished wood or distinguished tree. So yeah, it's honoring the aspen as a respectful tree, you know. It is distinguished. Make of that what you will. The second one is interesting, I think, in relation to the word psychopomp, because it translates as a synonym of a friend, and that just means another word for friend. So this tree is the friend tree, and it's also the psychopomp tree, you know. So it is that friend that is going to hold your hand and lead you through the dark tunnel to the light at the end of the tunnel, you know. Synonym of a friend. A curious thing is the third Bryatheroums, the later one, the Herculean one, says brother of birch. Now, it might be the brother of birch because a lot of people that aren't used to trees can't tell the difference, because there's a similarity. They both have white trunks, and their leaves, the juvenile leaves of the aspen, can look a bit birch-like, but I'll show that to you in a little bit. But more than them looking a little bit similar in a sense, they've got white trunks and kind of arrow-shaped leaves. The way they're positioned in the Ogham Grove is really interesting because they're on either side of you, you know, and you is kind of like the center point It's the midwinter moment. On the either side of it is aspen and birch. And so the kenning says brother of birch. I thought that was quite interesting, that they're siblings in a way. And then the auricept, Nanices, the scholar's primer, the word kenning for that is horrible grief. And I think then that is again the funeral, the loss of a loved one, you know, someone dying and all of that, you know. So it's acknowledging the complete horrible grief of death, maybe of a loved one. Right. So from the Ogham perspective on the year wheel, the aspen tree goes from 3 degrees Sagittarius to 21 degrees Sagittarius. So it's the only tree that completely corresponds with Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is very important for, I guess, a very special reason, really. And I don't know if the ancient people understood this or whether it's just a happy accident. But the very center of our galaxy, the Milky Way, the center point, the black hole, is in Sagittarius, you know. So most ancient cultures, I'd almost say all of them really, saw the stars or the Milky Way as the spirit realm, heavens above, you know, and that when souls die or when bodies die, the soul goes to the spirit world, you know. So that Sagittarius holds the position of death, the dead body, if you like, or the mortal wound after Scorpio. But within it is the very center of our galaxy, the very center of our star realm, if you like, is there with this psychopomp. The centaur, the wounded healer, Sagittarius, is a psychopomp. Now, a secondary constellation for Aspen is Hercules, the constellation of Hercules, you know, and there's Aspen law to do with Hercules. And the curious thing is, I'll touch on it in a little while, but the Gallic prototype of Ogma, Ogma's the god in mythology who created the Ogham writing system, and his prototype is Ogmius, a Gallic god, who was a Hercules figure, complete with club and lion skin. So you could see Hercules as an expression of Ogma, and that Ogma himself, as a Celtic Mercury, is also a psychopomp, you know. Maybe Ogma himself leading souls to the next world. Now, if you know the image of Ogmius and the chains from his tongue to their ears, that's quite interesting, that they might be following him to the next world as well. So we'll think about that as well. So I'm going to put the PowerPoint on and flick through some pictures. Just give me a second. Okay, so some trees have different shaped leaves depending on where they are on the tree. Holly does this. Holly has prickly leaves at the bottom to protect itself, and then the leaves of the holly tree that are higher up are smooth. They don't have prickles. There's no threat to them higher up. So holly's just prickly down below and then rounded, edged at the top. Now, same here with aspen. So on the right-hand side, this is a juvenile leaf. It's a bit arrow-headed or heart-shaped, really. And these are the leaves on the suckers and lower down. And the ones on the left are the mature leaves higher up. They're from the same tree, but they're quite different looking, you know. They just wear on the tree, you know. So higher up, they have these toothed edges and they're more round, whereas lower down, they're more like heart shapes. So that's your aspen leaf. Now, here's the position of aspen in the Ogham Grove. Now, I love the image then. So, you know, the psychopomp from a Welsh and Somerset perspective, and I think from Norse as well, really, but the wild hunt, certainly in Wales and Somerset, is led by Gwyn ap Neath, gathering souls to take them to the next world. And it's in Norse mythology too. Odin leads the wild hunt, gathering souls as well, you know. But so the story or the poem told by the Ogham Grove for this time of year starts with pine. And in the pine forests, the Irish hero Finn McCool and his young warriors, the Fenner, would prepare for the hunt in the pine forest. And then they come, or then we come to gorse and heather, and gorse and heather are the wild heath. It's the hunting land, you know. So, and that's centered on Samhain, you know. So Samhain's seen as this death of the old year, beginning of the new year from a Celtic perspective, and the seeds going into the ground, but also the wild hunt, psychopomp, picking up souls to lead them to the next world, you know, played out arguably by the winter hunter, who's also Cernunnos in Gaul and on the Gunderstrup cauldron, the antler-headed god of the winter hexagon. So we leave the pine forests, we go wild hunting through gorse and heather, through Samhain, and we come to the aspen forest, you know, and the aspen trees, all of their branches are full of five-pointed stars. It's the tree that represents the heaven starry realm. And then, you know, you could imagine the centaur, Sagittarius, or just a wild hunt, the antler-headed god, leading on through the aspen sacred ground to the ancient yew tree, you know, and that's going to be the conclusion, that winter solstice, you know. And at the yew tree beyond the aspen woods, there's the rebirth of the sun. And then that's followed by birch, a new beginning, a new cycle stuff, you know. And it's interesting, this diagram with that word kenning about aspen being the brother of birch, how they're side, you know, they balance the yew tree there. So this is an illustration for the wild hunt, you know. I call it waiting for the hunt. So on the left hand side is Libra above the dog's head, you know, that's the autumn equinox. And then it goes up through Scorpio, which is Samhain, into Sagittarius, and that's where we are now. And where the stag is in the middle, that's the yew tree at winter solstice, you know. So we're literally going into the spirit realm with the aspen trees. So in Greek mythology, this is a drawing I did of Ogma, but he is a Hercules type. His Gallic prototype, Ogmius, has a lion skin and a club. Now, I gave Ogma a club, which he has in Irish mythology anyway, and I gave him that big hairstyle, partly thinking of the Celts using lime to spike their hairstyles, but it was also deliberately thinking of a lion's mane for the lion's skin. So he's a bit of a leonine figure as well. But the Greek Hercules then, so in Northern Europe, the aspen tree is Populus tremula, the trembling aspen. That's what was in the British Isles and Ireland. But when you go further south to the Mediterranean, it's a different type of poplar. It's white poplar, Populus alba. So the white poplar mythology is the Mediterranean poplar mythology, or the Mediterranean aspen, if you like. And there is a story of Hercules himself defeating a fire-breathing giant called Cacus. And when Hercules defeats him, he makes a crown for himself out of white poplar leaves. So Hercules in Greek mythology has a crown of poplar leaves. And then there's another story where he brought back a white poplar tree from, I think, Hades or the Vale of the Styx, River Styx, and he found this white poplar tree and took it to Olympus. So there's this kind of poplar stuff with Hercules, who plays a psychopompic role as well. He's always defeating creatures of the other world, overcoming primordial fears, if you like. Everyone's friend, like the synonym for a friend. Mithras had that too. It was just friend. Like Christians with the archangel Michael. You know, you want him by your side when you're traveling to the next world. So, yeah, Ogma as a Hercules type then. Now, here's an amazing thing. I didn't know about this until recently. This is a ornate golden headdress from Mesopotamia. Okay, this is 4,500 years old, and it's from a queen in Mesopotamia. What comes her name? Puabi, Puabi, Queen Puabi. And this is her funeral headdress, and it has aspen leaves in gold all around it. And she was buried with female handmaids, and they were all wearing golden aspen leaves. These are incredible. These are headdresses, you know, each aspen leaf around the head. You know, the soul was often considered to live in the head as well, you know. So going right back to ancient Mesopotamia, the aspen leaf is there in the burials as the psychopomp leaf. Now, it's a totally different thing, I guess, but it's, you know, that the early Irish origin mythology, especially for the Gaelic Scots, claimed descent from an Egyptian princess called Scota. You know, that's in the oldest Irish histories of themselves, apart from a load of pseudo history which is Old Testament based, you know, like descendants of Noah, that kind of thing. But the Scots of the Western Isles claimed descent from Princess Scota, and she was meant to have gone from Egypt to Spain, and then for about 1,000 years all of her descendants multiplied, and they traveled up the Atlantic coast and became the Scoti, Scotland. You know, whether that's true or not, it's kind of acknowledging that the Iberian Peninsula had a connection to the east, you know, Phoenicians, Egyptians, Mesopotamians, Silk Route trade, and that influence is there. So it, you know, it's very tenuous, but this aspen leaf psychopomp role for burials in the ancient world, could it have traveled all the way to Ireland where they use aspen rods to prepare bodies for burial? That's an interesting idea. On the right-hand side, you can see the constellation of Scorpio, and on the left, part of Sagittarius, and in the middle it says Galactic Centre, you know, and that's where we are at the moment in the year wheel. You know, we're transitioning from Scorpio to Sagittarius. We left Scorpio a few days ago, so we're on the Sagittarius side of that cusp between Scorpio and Sagittarius. So in a way, we're pretty much lining up with Galactic Centre right now, the very heart of the spirit world, the star realm, the heavens, if you like, you know. And in every single aspen twig, the stars, you know. Aspen is the psychopomp tree, tree of stars, tree of the spirit world. So there's my little talk. I'll stop recording and you can put your microphones on and we'll chat about those ideas.